Hello, my name's Darren and welcome to the Maker's Rage podcast. So a more controversial one today. I'm going to discuss diversity casting in film and the stage. And this is largely in response to the 2025 TV series Amadeus, which features the English actor Will Sharp in the role of the composer, whose mother is Japanese and I guess he is visibly of Asian appearance. And so there's been an online discussion over whether or not one can justifiably race swap historical figures. Now, the events depicted in the series are largely fictional. It is adapted from the 1979 play Amadeus by Peter Shaffer, which also inspired the multi-Oscar-winning 1984 movie by Milos Forman, which starred a very Caucasian Tom Hulce in the role of Amadeus. Peter Shaffer's play is itself inspired by a short 1830 play by Alexander Pushkin, Mozart and Salieri, also a work of fiction. And it can be argued that the depiction of Antonio Salieri in both plays and the movie and the TV series does the real Salieri a great injustice. And he's played by Paul Bettany in the 2025 TV miniseries. Not the most Mediterranean-looking actor. What if we grant that we're talking about a work of fiction and the events described completely ahistorical, and even the characters, their personalities as depicted, fictive, non-biographical? Is it okay to have that character depicted by an Asian actor, a black actor, that we're talking about Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, a real, historical figure, a notable figure, who happens to be of European descent? Now, of course, it can be argued that for centuries white European figures, especially in the West, have dominated culture, education, art and the screen, while others were marginalised. So, from this perspective, it might seem reasonable in a work of fiction to reimagine a figure like Mozart with a non-white actor, since the figure of Mozart, historically, is secure, they will say, because he is a dead white male. Mozart's identity isn't vulnerable to erasure, and that casting a non-white actor in the role of Amadeus expands access to the historical figure. And Mozart, as so many Western composers, is very popular in East Asia. So what harm is there in having an actor of East Asian appearance depict him in film, especially if it means young East Asian aspiring pianists and violinists will better identify with the historical Mozart? As superficial as it might seem, it's easier for young people especially to identify with and emulate great figures in history or fiction who happen to look like them. It's certainly not as controversial as the BBC 1970s production of Othello featuring Anthony Hopkins in blackface. Now, Othello isn't a historical figure, but in the play he describes himself and is described by others as black. Happily, for I am black, he says of himself. So it wouldn't really make sense to cast an East Asian in the role of Othello. Although I can imagine a production featuring samurai warriors and perhaps removing any reference to his black appearance, although that would make it a different play. And there have been all-female casts of Hamlet and all-black casts of Macbeth. And Hamlet and Macbeth are supposedly historical figures, though further removed. In fact, they've almost receded into the mists of legend. By contrast, we know quite a lot about Mozart's life. He still seems like a contemporary. And Austria, like Ireland, is a small country that punches above its weight. In Ireland, we're protective of our heroes, and we insist upon their Irishness. If I were Austrian, I'd wonder whether filmmakers would as readily cast a black actor or an Asian actor in the role of Hitler, say. We've all seen our share of white Jesuses. Imagine a white Buddha, or a Gandhi, or a Martin Luther King. Those who'd wince at this know that images carry history with them. And if images truly shape authority and meaning, then changing who embodies historically significant figures is never neutral. It's always an exercise of symbolic power. So declaring some figures, dead white males like Mozart, as safe to reconfigure, and others from a marginalized group as protected, doesn't remove hierarchy, it simply redraws it according to contemporary moral priorities. In the TV series, Mozart's antagonist, Salieri, the disgruntled, resentful, hateful mediocrity, is played by Paul Bettany. Imagine an East Asian actor cast in this role, and Mozart cast, more accurately, with blonde hair and blue eyes. They'd be crying racism from the rooftops. So you see, what begins as a corrective to past imbalance, or perceived imbalance, quietly becomes a new form of selective myth-making, which insulates itself from critique by treating any disagreement as ethically questionable. Having an all-white cast play historically white European figures in the Habsburg court may or may not restrict the reach the TV show has in terms of audience size, but this isn't a sound argument for distorting history. You can call it artistic license in the name of inclusivity. You could say it addresses historical imbalances in representation in the arts, but it's really about who controls meaning. So a more sensitive topic than usual. By the way, the new Amadeus is actually okay. I have a soft spot for the 1984 film though. I've certainly nothing against the actors or the filmmakers of the new production, and I recommend that everyone go watch it and draw their own conclusions. I suppose I just used it as an opportunity to discuss a wider topic. Feel free to disagree with me vehemently in the comments, by the way. Oh, and don't forget to like and subscribe.